morning. My name is Karen Lee Garcia, the Chief Programs Officer with the Arts Council for Monterey County. And welcome to our quarterly professional development series called BusinessWorks. This is a program for artists, arts organizations, community members, and we try to tailor it to the needs of that we hear in the community and from our artists in particular. And today I'm just so happy to welcome Raz to speak on the topic of artist management from studio to stage. And before I introduce Raz, I just like to thank our team that's here today from the Arts Council. So Deli Otsu, our communications director, Naomi, our marketing coordinator, Janelle is here, our development director. Outside, we're fully staffed. Emerald is here, our events coordinator, she's outside. And I just want to say, and we also have another staff member coming, she's not here yet. But thank you guys, it takes a team effort to pull these events together, so I want to thank them in particular. And just quick housekeeping, there's 2 restrooms right through this door. As you guys see, there's snacks and refreshments. Feel free to get up and grab whatever you need. And I just want to introduce Raz. So I'm just going to quickly read her bio. A lot of people know her, but she is a singer, violinist, and she's a songwriter and classically trained musician. She performs with her custom 7-string electric Viper violin, which I thought she was going to bring, but I don't see it, which allows her to sing and play at the same time and encompasses the range of a violin, viola, and cello. Through the mastery of modern digital technology, including live looping, DJing, and processing, she blends powerhouse vocals with her unique violin and designed to build songs with the sophistication of a string quartet. Razzvio's all-new brand of interactive electric string pop will make you rethink the electric violin. Razzvio has toured throughout the United States with her intimate, self-sustained, and volume-controlled setup, delighting listeners in concert halls, clubs, and street corners since 2013. She's performed at the Monterey and Napa Valley Film Festivals, the Concours d'Elegance, and multiple fairs, festivals, and colleges around the country. She's also an aerialist and a fire performer, and is currently, the musical director of the Dam Circus Collective. And she's going to talk to us a little bit more about what that is. And the Dam Circus will be taking their show, Salooniverse, on the road this year to Denver, LA, and Michigan. So welcome, Raz. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Thank you Wave Street for having me. Thank you to the Arts Council for inviting me to do this. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. We're going to get into a couple more details, but one of the things I wanted to do today was get a sense of what is going on with everybody here. So I did not bring my instrument today because one of the points that I'm going to be making throughout this talk is that what you are doing kind of is a great thing to personalize, but how you're doing it and how you are communicating what you're doing to others is actually the key part about running your music like a business. So I am a performance person. I'm definitely a live performer, and that is the key part of my business. There's other types of artists that make performance art maybe an aspect of their artwork, but not their primary. So some artists are painters, some artists are producing different kinds of mediums, and the idea behind today's talk that I wanted to hone in on was that it doesn't hugely matter what kind of performance medium or what kind of art medium you are working in, as long as some of these same principles in marketing apply to almost every single art form. So I would, at some point, I'm going to ask you to sort of go around the room and then just say a little bit about if you're in an arts medium or performance medium, and so that we might be able to come up with some specific examples. I'll always talk about my specific examples of how I'm using these tools, but I really would love to be able to give some concrete examples because this is not one of those YouTube seminars where they're trying to get you to do their 5-week program. This is something where I would love people to walk away with some concrete examples in your medium and how it can work for you. And the reason why I know all of this is, yes, I've been a performer for the last decade. I've been a full-time musician for 10 years, which seems a little crazy. What is time? But the other side of it is I do have a master's degree in digital media marketing from the University of Washington that, for all that I joke that it's a master's in Facebook, because that was the main thing at the time, and now it's all these other different mediums. but the concepts behind marketing, digital branding, as well as business management are some of the things that I feel like have really helped me to create a performance career that is versatile and that I can always pivot and use different tools. So I think for me, pivoting my career into what is going to work, it has always been one of my biggest strengths, and recognizing what's working and what doesn't is one of the key aspects, I think, of having longevity in your performance career. So let's get started. This is me with one of my agency events. So this was a promotional event in this photo, and I'm in a lollipop lira and playing violin, which was sort of a coup for me for this particular event, because I had not worked with this event planner in that medium before, of incorporating aerial and violin. So this is a new market that I'm getting into. It's something that I'm getting a lot more recognition for, being asked to do a lot more often, and guess what? That comes with a much higher price tag than some other things that I do. So it's always been for me about making sure that people who want to hire me understand the breadth of products that I can bring to the table, understand the skill sets that I can bring to the table, and then continually amp up that understanding. So this is how it started. These are all of the different projects that I was a part of, starting from like very bitty time. We're not going into baby Raz. That's not gonna happen. Basically, I've been playing violin since I was 7 years old. So there's a lot of photos of me holding my violin with a very deep concentration face in every single classical music application. I was a member of Youth Music Monterey here in Monterey. I was their principal violist for many years. So I definitely have roots here in the community and the music programs here, which I so thank. David Daly was my teacher for a while, and he's still very active, and it's hilarious to see him at shows sometimes, because he's like, hey, you fixed my vibrato when I was 16. So this was my very first band. This was the Stanford Marching Band. And I was a student at Stanford from 2006 to 2010, and I graduated with my degree in biology. Did not think I was going to be a full-time musician at all. In fact, I fought it tooth and nail, and it turns out I have to do it. There's no other options. But I did join the Stanford Marching Band because they were funny and they were fun and they were really irreverent, and I was very sick of classical music and sort of the attitudes with classical, but I loved playing violin. So to play violin in the marching band was a way to sort of like thumb my nose at some of the classical stuff that I was tired of, but still be around people who really loved music and loved performance. And then I met these girls through that Stanford Marching Band, and this is my all-girl punk band. We were called Blow Up Dolls. We played together for 6 years. We toured the East Coast. We went all up and down California. I spent most of my weekends through the end of my college years out playing in shows in like Livermore and Fresno and LA. And so it was every single weekend I'd be off campus performing with these ladies. I was 19 when this band started, and I was not allowed in the bars, so I had to sneak in. And then I was always the designated driver for like a good 2 years. So I was, in my own way, I was a goody two-shoes, but yeah. So I started playing in punk bands and bars at 19 with this amazing group of women, and that really helped transform my understanding of rock music, playing in a band, working with others, writing original songs. I was the lead guitarist as their violinist because that was the best place for me to be, and so getting to be basically that lead guitar role was a really fun experience. Moved to Seattle to pursue my master's degree and met these wonderful people. This is a heavy metal band called Arrakis, not Dune related. But playing in that band was actually very theatrical. It was a full heavy metal opera. It was a 2-hour-long opera complete with full stage acts, combat, sword combat. Many of the members were members of the Seattle Knights, which is a troupe of knights that perform all over the country and do jousting. And so to be in a theatrical setting with this group of people, I think set the stage for me later, going into more circus performance, and to get to play heavy metal on the violin again was just a really good education. This is my first job as a musician, and this was at the Seattle airport. They had a program that brought in street performers and buskers to play at the airport for a stipend of $100 a day. And that was for a 4-hour performance, but then you could take and collect whatever tips you got, and that was where I realized that, oh wait, this could be a living, because I got really good at connecting with people in their travels and getting to basically have that moment, that one-on-one moment of, hey, I see you, you see me, and they would tip me for that. and I could leave. I think the record I made at the Seattle airport was $500 in tips. I could sell albums. I've had people around the country go, I have your CD. Like, I met you at the Seattle airport going from A to B, and I still have your CD, and I'm just like, that blew my mind. It's just like, oh my God, it's because you meet hundreds and hundreds of people, and it was the most incredible experience. I was in that program for 2 years until I left Seattle, and it is still going. That program has won awards. It's one of the longest running programs in the United States for airports. I think Portland beats them by just like a little bit, because Seattle and Portland always in competition. And then this is my final band that I wrote original music with at the moment, at least. This band was called Direct Divide, and we went on the road and we toured the country for 3 years in a van. Sometimes the three of us, sometimes just me and him. So this is my husband, Kevin. I married that guy. So, and we've been working together in music for 12 years. So we wrote 2 original albums, toured the country, had the best time, but learned a lot about running music as a business and learned a lot about what it takes to be doing this full time. And we've been pretty scrappy, I feel like, throughout our careers, and now it's kind of crazy that we're getting to this point where we get to share this information with other people. So Kevin works now as the production manager for the Sunset Center, as well as he owns a production business that we help other people put on shows and concerts, and then I'm a full-time musician. So that's how it started. This is where I am now. I've incorporated a lot of aerial into my work. That started during the pandemic because I ended up buying a pole dance studio in order to keep myself sane. Because I think artists, we have multiple artistic mediums, and I'm gonna talk a little bit later about how important it is to cultivate more than one thing, more than one interest, more than one side of your personality, because that's what is gonna make you really unique and different. So incorporating aerial, incorporating more circus theatricality that I was already pretty much going into has been a really big help in terms of setting me apart from other violinists, setting me apart from other people in the different organizations and agencies that I work with, and also having a really key visual brand. Like, that is one thing I want to say, like those first photos, a little less polished, a little less produced. One thing I've really worked hard on this year and in the past couple of years is having a much more solidified visual brand so that people can connect with what I'm doing and understand it a lot faster. And so that is where, this is me at a wedding, this is me at a recent fire retreat where I'm learning new skills, this is the Damn Circus crew that I have written several shows with, this is one of my agencies that I do really over-the-top event production with. Again, and most of these are either agencies or they're personal shows that I've produced and helped put together. So that gives me a lot more control over the mediums that I'm working in, and it also gives me a lot more diversity of expression so that people can hone in on more than just the fact that I play violin. I play weird violins and weird scenarios, and so that's part of my branding. So a little bit about me, I'm really an open book when it comes to the statistics of how and what I do, so I wanted to give you guys just a rundown of how 2023 went. It was a good year. Coming out of COVID, obviously COVID was a terrible year for me. Like most artists, my income went to pretty much nothing, and thank goodness for some of the programs that let us, people who are working as full-time musicians or artists, a lot of us had government assistance, which was really, really important, and I cannot downplay the importance of that government assistance in terms of not having to go right back out into the workforce. I did actually get some gigs during 2020 of people that I will not call out, but gigs I probably shouldn't have played either. But yes, it was always interesting to see who was still trying to have events, who was still maybe doing things that they shouldn't have been doing. But when you're an artist, you have to say yes, and so that was always really weird, where all my friends were being really cautious who were in the tech world, and I was like, well, I can't, so I'm over here. But as things and events have come back, what I've noticed is that agencies are really active right now, corporate events are really active right now. There's a lot of businesses that want to entertain their workers. People are having a little bit of a moment with work, where they're going, work kind of sucks. And part of us wishes we didn't have to do this anymore. And so businesses are kind of incentivized to have a workplace culture be a place where people want to exist. And that means that entertainers coming in can help make that workplace culture a little more fun, a little more vibrant, And so events in corporate world have actually been really, really strong lately, and that's a trend I see continuing through 2024. So that resulted last year in a lot of gigs, 96 gigs in 2023 that were just mainly corporate kind of paying work. This doesn't count any of the other stuff I did for fun outside of that. I do make an average of $1,000 a gig. So that is a pretty big outlier, and it's a couple different reasons. Mainly that I do work primarily up in San Francisco, Napa, and that means that I'm driving a lot. So part of that is fees and stuff that I have to tap on to make travel happen. I do travel sometimes outside of California. And again, some of those, just realize that that's an average, and some of those are bigger than others. And that includes a lot of the cost it takes to do those gigs. And that could be flights, that could be anything like that. So just because the business of Razzvio made that kind of money doesn't mean that that's the money that like I take home. So that's what part of like the business side is, really recognizing that difference and going like, when you're pricing for the fact that you are actually putting in a lot of cost that needs to be recognized and kind of categorized. My work is very cyclical. It tends to have ebbs and flows. After 10 years, I kind of know how to anticipate that until I don't, and then it still bites me in the butt. So February is usually a really open time. January, February is pretty light. But February last year was really light, and I got a little nervous, and usually my booking schedule is 3 to 6 months in advance. So if you're asking me within a month, it's very unlikely if you want a weekend that I'm available. Sometimes it can be as far as 6 to 9 months that I book out, and just keep track of that in my scheduling. It just depends. But that February I was really nervous, and so I was booking 3 months out, and look what happened. Oh, I screwed myself so bad. Said yes to way too many things, and then I died. Like, it was just, that was too many gigs. But you can kind of see like that panic, that not knowing what's gonna happen. We do have these moments where we feel really insecure about what's gonna be coming down the pipeline. Because it's like, I don't have any control over this. But then when you let that get to you, then you get these weird outliers and nobody's happy. So this is about normal for me, is like 8 to 10. And it's more in the fall, it's less in the spring. So that's just something I have to learn how to anticipate. And taking data has really helped that, because it makes me calmer. Just be like, you're fine, it's fine. This year, that has not been the case. This year's been an outlier, which tells me that in the spring, which tells me that that's why there's so much interest in corporate work going forward. And I think we're gonna get a little more intense as it goes into fall. So if you're looking at booking fall and you wanna get into corporate, like this might be the time, because they are looking for stuff, because spring did not calm down this year. 75% of my gigs are solo, which means that I'm playing either looping over tracks or as the only performer for that event, which again means that the money that is available is a little bit, it's like I get it all. That does mean I'm bringing a lot of tools and technology, including speakers. I need to know how to set up my own speakers. I need to know how to operate sound systems. I'm a DJ, so half the time that means these fees also include being a DJ, which is a very different medium than somebody who's like in a band or working in a jazz band or a quartet, where you're sharing that pie with other people. So that is another thing that will impact your income and impact what you can ask for, is the kind of medium and the marketplace deciding what you're worth. Might not be true, but that is a real factor. So I don't often play with other people, because the time it takes to have a regular band, you need to be practicing a lot more. And most of the time, I'm busy. I'm gonna be off doing my own thing. I do enjoy playing with bands when I can. I get to play with a band this weekend, but I have to drive to Sacramento to go to practice. So that was a cost, right? Like that was a cost for me to do that. And that means that I'm also taking less money because I'm playing with a band, and so we're splitting everything. So like there's just money to be thought of in that, if you need it to be thought of in that way. Any questions about this? Because we're gonna get into you guys, because now we're pretty much done with some of the stuff that I do.
When you talk about contacting and going into corporate and stuff like that, are we talking cold contact? Are we working through agents? Like how do we get into that market?
Most of my corporate market is through agencies, and the way that I've gotten into is I started by applying to 1 or 2 agencies and then getting on their rosters. I'm on the rosters of I think 12 to 15 agencies at this point, and they are not all asking me for things. I do have, and again, even agencies go in cycles, which I've noticed.
Okay.
You're in with that agency for a while, and then they get tired of pitching you, or they think it's like, oh, we've been there, done that, and then you don't get some work with them for a while. So an agent in this sense, I just want to be really clear about what agency means for a performance career and a performance medium. An agent is somebody whose key is to represent their client. You are not their client in some ways. Some agents are representing you to a client. Some agencies are representing an entertainment or a production that they're pulling you in to be a part of. So there's agents that represent you as the artist, whose job is to basically say, here's this amazing person, you should hire them. And then there are entertainment agencies whose job is to represent events that they're pulling you in to collaborate on. So like knowing who you're kind of talking to is really helpful. Entertainment agencies that focus on talent and performers do tend to take submissions to be on their roster, and they'll pitch you out as part of that, as a part of several different options. Entertainment agencies that are focusing on events will sometimes go into those big pools of people to work and find talent, but they can also work with you directly if they have a good working relationship. And those usually you'll see the difference in contracts, where I will send contracts to agencies that are hiring me for their events. That's my job. As the person who is representing myself in that context. If I'm working with an agent that is representing multiple different artists, usually they're handling contracts. So again, they're taking a piece of the fee as part of their, usually it's about 20%, but more for some agencies, which I've been like, I have been CC'd on some emails I shouldn't have seen. So not everybody handles everything the same way. You're allowed to ask, you're allowed to talk to them about that. But yeah, I've got 15 different agencies that I work with on all sides of that map. So some of them I have to provide my own contracts, my own insurance, my own information for. Some of that's handled directly by the agency itself, and then they just call me and say, hey, we have this gig for you, do you want it?
Okay.
So yeah, 15. And sometimes they've asked for the same gig, and that gets really awkward.
So if you dive into a story of pricing, for example, yes versus no is a very important decision to make. Do you do the gig or not? And part of it is you being able to go and know what price is no and what price, let's go.
Oh yeah, I have a full chart. We'll get there. We will get there. Okay. Any other questions on this chart before I move on? And agencies and all that stuff. So this is mostly agency work. And again, because some fees are taken out of there, that isn't how I do my finances the whole time, but I was able to make this chart in about 15 minutes because I keep records of every single gig that I work. I keep records of how much it made. I keep records of when that person paid me, how much I'm expecting them to pay me. I have a shorthand in my calendar for that, because if I don't remember which agency booked me, how much they were going to pay me, what to expect in the contract, I can really lose track of what's going to happen. So I keep data mostly on Google spreadsheets. It's really simple. It's just every single month has a different tab, and every single date that I am booked to work, I'll either say, yes, this is a gig that's been booked, it has a contract. If something is not in contract, then I can go set reminders, or I can say, hey, is this still happening? Hey, do we need a contract for this? I don't consider anything booked without something in writing that says, yes, you are booked. And then 99% of the time, unless it's with an agency that I've worked with for many years and have a really good standing relationship, then they get trusted. But it's a very rare person that I will say that I'm going to show up to your event without a contract in place. Like, that's just asking for trouble. Because the contract is really important, and it's really helpful to have, because then you each know each other's expectations and what you want out of each other and how it's going to flow and who to contact the day of the event and all of these different details. We'll get into contracts later. Also, sometimes people forget to pay you, and it's not like a mean thing or just like, what just happened? So I know which bills are outstanding by having just notated. So when I get a check in, I go back into my spreadsheet, I'm like, they paid it on this date. Because then if the check doesn't clear, I still have that information. I can go back to my bank and I say, they paid on this date, this is what I deposited. Like all of these different business things. Having it in writing for me is really helpful, and then it lets me recognize trends. Which months I maybe panicked, and which months I maybe worked too much, and which months I need to work more, and which months I need to book more. Sometimes I can say no to gigs simply because I don't want to work more that month. I've got 5 weddings, I don't need another one. So I think also that lets you take a deep breath and then open up more space for being creative, which is a big part. None of this is very creative. This is a repeatable process that I can do over and over again that makes money so that I have time to go off and do other actually fun things. So I won't say like, this is work, guys. I love playing violin. Many times I show up to a gig and I'm sort of like schleppy about it, and then I like start playing. I'm like, okay, yeah, this is cool. But I wouldn't say like there's this deep-seated love of playing Ed Sheeran over and over and over again every single night. Don't get me wrong, I love his music, but like, oh my God, I've played that song so many times. So yeah, being able to stop taking gigs when you want to is really nice information to have. I have previous data from years back I can look on. I have data about how much somebody paid me for a similar service. So I can look back at a previous year and I was like, yeah, but you paid me this much last year, or this is the value of this over the years for a similar piece of information. So if I need to go back and say, hey, a 3-hour show at this rate, at this place in Napa, I might have that data from a previous event. I might not remember that I did that, but usually I can go back into my records and say like, hey, here's what I did. I usually don't double book. It has happened, I think 3 times in my career of 10 years. I'm really careful because that is my nightmare. And when it has happened, I've always tried to make amends and reschedule. In fact, I had a wedding where I accidentally double booked, and what I said was, hey, how about I play something for free, either for your rehearsal dinner or your anniversary. And they chose rehearsal dinner, offered to play it for free. They took me up on that, did the rehearsal dinner, and then they paid me after anyways. Because they felt considered, they felt taken care of, they felt like I cared enough to make it right. And so like that's just a business ethics that I felt like double booking is my nightmare. It's a really bad policy. It happens to everybody, God knows, we're not perfect. But if you can just acknowledge that that is like a failure of planning, then you're gonna go really far and you're gonna get a lot more people who really trust you. So I'll get into my process of how I avoid double bookings later, but we've got somewhere else to go to. Yeah, so Google spreadsheets are your friend when it comes to information. My other friend is over here. Ooh, sorry. I should know better than that. There's a speaker over there. Audio tech. Tools to keep you organized. This guy. If I don't write it down, I'm so screwed. I need the physicality of writing something down in my book. So this is what my schedule looks like. As we go, it'll get lighter, but the amount of stuff I write in here, I have a shorthand for the agency, the amount of money, where I'm going, how long of a gig. So that way, if somebody calls me for something and there's something in this book, I need to go back to the first person, unless it's in contract, and say, hey, I've got this other gig. In fact, I need to send one of those emails today. That somebody wants me for a gig, it's already spoken for by somebody else, we gotta have a negotiation about what that's gonna be. Day planners are really helpful because usually if you're on a phone planner and somebody's talking to you on the phone, you can't write the thing down because the thing you need to write it on is by your face, unless you're hands-free all the time. So I do recommend having something if you are a full-time artist to have notes to jot down, have a journal. I do a lot of journaling in this book. I will write ideas down. I will write down song ideas. I mean, the back is always open with notes. If somebody's calling me about specific event details, I can write stuff down. So just having like anything to keep records with that is a written thing. And I've lost this book once and I've had to recreate it, and it was like so heartrending. So because of that, I also still do make a digital backup in my phone. Every couple of weeks, I'll go back in and again, usually that's when I'm putting new data into my spreadsheets. So that's just like an administrative thing that I do, but it's really helped and saved my butt a lot of times. Online calendars, apps for the amount of travel I do, getting gas, going away, touring for 3 years, we would sleep in rest stops. And so there's an app that can find you a rest stop in almost anywhere in the country. So usually if you need something, there's like an app for that. And we used to have managers and like tour managers to do that stuff, and now we don't. So having a set of tools that you can just really grab onto on your phone or your iPad or your computer and say like, hey, these are my basic tools. And they're really not usually that crazy, like maps and day planners and scheduling. We're gonna kind of skip by this for a little fast and go through it a little faster, but this is the moment where I kind of want to go around the room really quick and see where you guys are at. So how many people are performance artists? Sweet. How many people are maybe artists that don't perform like a visual medium or a different kind of artist that don't consider performance as a primary part of their work? Okay. How many people would like to get paid to do their art? Yes! So, marketing yourself, and whether you're a performance artist or an artist that does a visual medium, the key is to know what the product is that you're trying to sell. And sometimes the product is going to be something that isn't necessarily the thing that brings you joy, but it is a byproduct or something that you do as part of your work. So I love playing music, I've always loved performing, and the product that I'm producing is not actually so much the music as it is the performance, as it is the way I communicate with my instrument, the kinds of music that I play, the visual look that I can add to an event. So that is all part of the product. A lot of people in music, especially, and a lot of performance art will think that the product is the recording that you have done of your performance. And I personally don't think that's true, especially in this day and age with digital media the way it's at. I think that is marketing. A piece of music that you have recorded is a marketing tool, not a product. When it stopped being a product when it became infinitely replicatable.
Yep.
When it became a digital file, it is no longer a product, it is advertising, because the cost to replicate that product is zero. The cost to replicate a performance is a cost. So that's where I usually draw the line of defining what is a product and what is advertising. You can advertise your product all day long with your recordings because it's infinitely replicatable. It could go anywhere, but you can't get the performance without paying for it. So that's something that, that's my philosophy when it comes to recordings. They're very important. Videos are very important, but just treat them like advertising. And I think it is a sad state of the industry that we used to have those things as products and now they're not. But it just means that we have to be a little bit more creative when it comes to defining the actual product and understanding that it is our talent and our skill and our work that is the product, not the record of it. So I have a record that I have been waiting to release, and I might not release it unless you come to the show. It might only be on a hard copy. It might only be something that you can get and listen to. I mean, and can people make a digital copy and then it goes off into the world? And I'm like, I would be so thrilled to have a bootleg of this thing out there because that would mean that it was desirable enough to bother.
Yep.
So that's a marketing strategy in and of itself, is withholding can also be a tool, but just so that I don't consider any recordings that I've ever made a product. They're not, they're marketing. My competition, I have really good relationships with my competition because I know that I'm different than them. So some people that I consider my personal competition are other violinists that work in the same medium. Basically, literally the person who would get hired to do the show if I'm not going to do it. Now that can result in a really nasty zero-sum game attitude when it comes to who's going to get the gig, and that is where I draw the line. I don't like that attitude at all. I think it should be a collaboration between competitors because we are all going to position ourselves differently in the marketplace. I would say that my primary competitor, I've actually kind of moved more into her space. She was doing aerial violin first, but she can't do every gig, so I got called in to do aerial violin after, and I was like, oh, I really like this. But I've specialized since then in other things. I'm more on the rock side, she's more on the classical music side. We've had many conversations back and forth. We've swapped gigs back and forth. Oftentimes we've subbed each other out for gigs, and it's been a really lovely working relationship because at no point are we looking at each other going, hey, I'm gonna step on your toes. I really don't wanna do that. So by positioning myself differently than somebody else doing a very similar thing to me, I can make sure that we're actually always standing kind of like arm's length rather than being in competition. And that actually comes with one of the reasons why I'm really transparent about my fees, because I want everybody to be able to have that same amount of information, because without it, you have these really big, wide oscillating swaths where somebody's quoting down here and somebody's quoting up here, and then that's confusing to your clients. If your competitors are asking way higher or way lower prices, your clients don't really know how to anticipate the cost of anything. So they're just going to maybe back off that market for a while. So having conversations with your competitors about pricing can be really helpful. And we're gonna get into the why of the pricing in a second, because that is a longer conversation than just this is what I charge. But that's basically how I usually position myself for marketing. The other way that I position, and this is how I would position myself for marketing, is lean into what makes you different. I love rock and roll, I love heavy metal. When I started DJing, it was because I was playing a lot of weddings and I would watch the DJ load in and I'd be like, wait, they're getting paid how much? I should probably go do that because I can work technology. I'm fairly confident with working technology until I go get something under a speaker that I shouldn't have done. So that, and then when I got into DJing, I was like, oh, I have to do what all these other wedding DJs do. And that's not really true. I still have this background in heavy metal and I love rock and roll. So when I'm DJing, lately it's been my strategy to get some of my favorite rock and roll songs and find new remixes. So songs that people know from way back when, and get really new modern versions of those songs or create them, and because I can play all of those riffs on my violin. So when I did the Pebble Beach Food and Wine Festival, I got a lot of comments back that was a really fun thing, that people knew the songs. They might not have known that version of the song, but they knew the songs. I was like, yes, my goal is there. So that was a positioning that I was very, very careful of and very specific about, was that I wanted to be this DJ that had this connection to nostalgia. So that was part of not just the violin. So the violin was definitely like a flashy, beautiful, like, hey, you can do this thing, it's really different, but it needed another layer than that, because just playing the violin sounding like everybody else was not gonna make enough, wasn't gonna move the needle enough. So I'm a rock and roll violinist, very much attuned into those things, and that's how I present myself in many, many ways, not just the DJing side, but also when I'm performing, even for events. I do a lot of classic rock songs. When I'm doing events, even if it's like some Napa swanky party, I have been known to put in some songs there without lyrics that probably, if you knew I was playing them, would be eyebrow raising, like the thong song. I put the thong song into so many high notes, you guys. But it's a version that nobody gets, and it's actually a really beautiful melody. And so if you play it on violin, and only I'm entertained in the background, so knowing that, like, I'm just in my little head, just being like singing it to myself. The things that make me happy during corporate gigs. Follow people with similar tastes. So we have this really helpful, handy tool in our back pocket called our phones. And if you are on social media, on TikTok, on Instagram, and you're somebody who consumes media on Instagram, there is an algorithm whose job it is to look at what you like and feed it back to you. If you can observe what the algorithm is feeding to you, you'll see patterns in your own behavior, patterns of things that you like, things that you look at, things that you want to see. That's kind of a hint. Go down that road as much as you want. The weirder you get, kind of the better it is in some ways when it comes to art, because that is, again, what sets you apart. If you are spending a whole lot of time being like, I should be looking at this, I should be watching these videos, I should be learning these things, and it feels like pulling teeth, it's not who you are. I think we perform, as performers, we tend to be like, I can be anything, I can be a chameleon, I can do anything for anybody, and then you lose sight of what makes you really unique and different. Lean into your weirdness, just do it. It's so helpful. You can make it palatable, you can spin it, you can, buff up the shiny side and like, we're not gonna pay attention to all the weird cracks back here, but this is the cute, this is my best side. That's fine. But a lot of people want what makes you different. More than just, I'm not a violinist, I'm a rock and roll weirdo violinist who likes being up in the air with red hair, and I'm going to be playing classic rock while I do it. That's a very specific niche, but it's surprising how many people want one piece of that or another. They might not want all of it all at once, that might be a little much. I was told literally by Pebble Beach from one of my agents that I was a little much. I was like, okay, that's fine. I've been back to play plenty of times because the person who hired me to go work at Pebble didn't think that. So Pebble Beach can think that however much they want. I've been at that venue so many times since that conversation. They might not hire me directly, but they won't say anything if somebody else does. So it's one of those, like, it's okay if somebody doesn't like it. That's not the end of the world. You're gonna find your people that do. I don't have a lot of weddings. I think as a female DJ, I don't self-select. A lot of brides who are a little more conservative, who don't really want that attitude, wouldn't select me as their DJ. That's fine. What it does mean is the brides that do select me as their DJ usually have tastes in music that I can really get behind, usually really want something out there and cool and fun and exciting. They want the violin to light up, they want all these things, and we have a blast. So by not being somebody who's palatable to everybody, I've actually been like, the people that do hire me are my people, and it's so much of a nicer place to be for me. Anyways. So then I don't have to play the phone song all the time. And really, I do it as vengeance, guys. If I'm just like bored out of my skull, you're getting all the weird songs. It's like, finding customers, customer segments, product packages. The biggest point with this, I can send this file to anybody who wants to dive deeper, but I definitely wanted to get into your question about like the why of the pricing. So this one is the key, empathize on your customers' needs. And this is more towards like people that book into venues that are like bars and places that maybe their primary focus is not their performance. And that is, they've got bills to pay, y'all. And when I was working as a full-time performer on the road, we focused on breweries. Because breweries could pay us a flat fee, but we needed people to be there for more than one drink. And we had no draw. Like there was nobody who was gonna come to the brewery in, Idaho. They didn't know us from anybody, but they knew that they wanted to come to the brewery. And if we could keep them there for a whole set of music, they were likely to drink one more beer than they would have if we had not been playing. That was what that business needed. So we had to play sets that were 3-4 hours long because that was what they were gonna get out of it. A no-name band that didn't have any draw in that town, but if we could keep people there, then that was the goal. If you've got a local following or you're performing in places where you're a regular at a venue, just knowing that like your job in a bar is to make somebody stay for one more drink than they would have otherwise, or bring somebody in that wouldn't have been in that bar that day. Those are your two main goals as the collaborator, empathizing with your customers' needs in that sense. I've just seen it work so many different ways where bands rightly feel like there's not a whole lot for them, and I think that is the case here, but it is also because there's not a lot of collaboration when it comes to those needs of like, what are we here to do, guys? Are we here to play for somebody? Are we here to serve the bar's needs? I think that's where our jazz community is pretty strong, because those guys, they know how to keep people there. We got some great jazz players that do a really good job at keeping people happy, so you can do a really great time. This is the other one. If you're working with a cold network, expect a 10% response rate at best. When we were touring again in that scenario where we were in breweries, we had to email 5,000 people to get 200 shows. So cold emails will work like 1 to 10% of the time. So if you're sending out a bunch of cold emails, you can't send one and expect it to work. You need to send, so with the agencies, put your package together, send it to 100 agencies. It's worth it. You might get one, but that one might get you one gig that will pay for your time to send those 100 emails and to put that package together. So do not be discouraged if you email 5 people and don't hear anything back. You're in the wrong, the math is not gonna work out if it's cold. Warm network, that means somebody that is like a friend of a friend that you've been referred to, that has information that can set you up or say like, yeah, you're a good fit for this and can vouch for you. A warm network is like 50% success rate, maybe. Like 30 to 50%, it's still not a guarantee. So that's kind of helpful, is like, just don't take it personally if it's a cold network. They just don't know you from Adam. There's no other way to do it. This one of my favorite graphics ever. How you price yourself. You can have it fast, you can have it cheap, or you can have it good. You can get to pick 2 of those things. Not all 3. So that means that if somebody expects you to do something really well, but they're only gonna give you an hour to do it, you're like, better be frickin' paying me a lot of money. Because that means that you know how to do that in an hour. You spent the time to get going for that hour, and this is such a good way of explaining anything as a producer. For artists, it can be a little tough because how to value yourself gets a little sticky, but basically if somebody's asking you to do something faster than you normally would, bump your price up. Because their expectations need to be met with a requisite like, hey, I can do that, but it's gonna have to have an extra fee because I need to take time out of my life to make this happen for you and spend extra time on it. You spend a lot of time working by yourself as a professional performer, practicing and doing the stuff that nobody ever sees, and so that's what lets you do something fast and good. But I ain't gonna be cheap because all those hours were spent making it fast and good. Yeah, and then this is, so my pricing formula, usually it's market rate here or in California, it's about $300 to $500 an hour depending on where I am. And then travel costs, equipment, meaning if I'm bringing the sound system, that's usually an upcharge. Additional customizations. Do y'all know what that might be?
Yeah.
If there's somebody who's difficult to work with, you are encouraged, please just charge them something extra that makes you want to work with them. Like, it's allowed, guys. It's not weird. We all do it. We all have that one agent where you're just like, sure, you got a higher price than everybody else. Because it's about, they'll get it or they won't. But it is something that I think as artists, I've had gigs where I really don't want to take the gig, and usually I'll just price myself out of it, or I think I do, and I've backfired a couple of times where I give like an astronomically high price and they go, okay. And you're just like, oh, guess I'm going to Texas, all right. That's actually a great way to say no. You're allowed to say no, and sometimes the best way to say no is just to be like, this is how much it would cost for me to want to do this. That's valid. So you get to determine your price, and it can be based off of a lot of things that have nothing to do with what it should have actually cost. However, for regular work, for people that you trust, it's helpful to have a process because it's a faster thing. You don't get mired up in the feeling weird about it. So if I have basic math and it's the same across all my agencies, that means that I'm pretty happy to do that show. Now, there's something where it goes like, hey, don't you want to always chase the higher price point? And my answer is absolutely not, because a higher price point usually means more work for me. So if my base rate is the same for a gig that costs 2 hours, and that's going to get me like $600, or the gig that's going to be a wedding that's going to be $2,000, some days I just kind of don't want to work all day, and I just want to do the 2-hour thing, and I'm going to be happy with that because the base rate matches up. So it's actually, I'm working as much as what my value is, and so I'm not always incentivized to like take the higher money, which means that if a gig comes in or I have to say no to a higher paying gig, it's also going to mean it was going to be a lot more work anyways. So it's just like the math for me works out really well so that I don't feel overworked often and I don't feel undervalued either. Yeah, and any extra preparation, something that takes you a little bit more time to do, can also be an extra fee because, okay, this guy at Microsoft asked me to like play his birthday party, and this was in Seattle, and it was this whole thing, and then he asked me to learn like 2 hours of classical music, and I tried to get out of that gig so hard, you guys. I tried to refer out, I tried to like do everything I could to be like, hire somebody else for the love of God, like who actually wants to play classical music, but no, he wanted me to do it, and I was like, okay, I'll do it. It was so much money. I didn't want the money, you guys. I just wanted not to have to play this classical piece. But anyways, it was a funny experience because, you know, you're there at the gig and you're doing the thing and nobody cares. I'm glad I did the preparation. It was like a nice thing to go back and do, but the amount I tried to get out of that gig, y'all, like gently, safely by just being like, somebody else, he wanted Wagner. He wanted a full orchestral piece. And I was like, how do you expect me to do this? This is a 4-hour long, like what? What do you mean? What does any of this mean? And it was just so unclear. So I just ended up playing the backing, like I just played the symphony on my phone, on the speakers, and like played a little bit over it, and I just made stuff up. I so tried to understand it was one of those weirdest things I've ever done. And then I had to go tell Bill Gates to go sit down. Because these events happen and they're just like so otherworldly, and you're just like, this is weird. But it wasn't my brand, and so I was just really trying not to put myself up for that, but whatever. It worked out in the end, so it just was one of the weirder ones I've done. This is what I'm going to spend most of the rest of this time on, and then we're opening up for questions because we're almost there. This is how and the why of how I price my work. So not my rate is based off of the market, but I do plenty of things for less than that, and I do plenty of things for free but this is the chart that I use to determine that. This is also, if you're talking to other people who are your competitors or in your medium, understand that not everybody's price is gonna be the same, because not everybody's understanding of this chart is gonna be in the same place. So for me, yay money, this is how I make my living, so money has to be part of the equation most of the time. However, if it's only about money, it's soul-sucking drudgery and I hate it. So I usually like in this Venn diagram to be somewhere in here, and where I am in here is gonna shift depending on how much I've been in these spots. So usually I kind of like make my way around the circle of this Venn diagram. Do I end up out here sometimes? Yeah, I don't like to live there though, because it's not a great place for me to be. So money I can really use another instrument. This is, out here is all of the yay part of that result, or what you get out of being in just this one side. This is usually the negative, soul-sucking drudgery. Community, people's opinion, who you actually care about. A lot of people who want you to, especially when you're a band, a lot of people will say, hey, this is a really, like, you should care about me. And half the time I'm like, do I though? I really don't. This is where a lot of people can be like, opportunities from outside of your network and try to tell you that they're your community. So people who say like, hey, I can get you a gig at Coachella. And you're just like, I don't think so. No. So the people you actually care about, that's your community. Too much of that, it's for a good cause, man. I don't need that all the time. And sometimes I'll say yes and sometimes I'll say no. Usually I'll say yes the first time. And then if it hasn't moved from this into one of the overlapping ones, then I'll say, I'm good. Like, you get one, maybe two if I really, really like you. But that's usually for me in community. Experience. Experience and exposure tend to be used quite often in flip, so that's why I avoid the word exposure, because exposure means in front of people that are technically somebody you want to be your community, but it oftentimes is a lie. So exposure, people die of exposure. That's my favorite response to that. Experience, a skill you want to practice but have not mastered yet. That is where exposure is actually valuable, because if you have a skill that you're still needing the practice on, and performance is practice. You can practice something in your bedroom and then you get into it in a performance aspect and it is way more nerve-wracking. So practicing it in a safe environment where maybe the stakes are a little lower, that's usually a good spot to get that exposure. But if it's not really a skill that you need to develop, like if I don't need to play Ed Sheeran for experience, I've done it so many times. So that's not in the experience category. Community and experience equals practice for me. So that's where I'll often do things that I'm either working on, like I'll be doing a fire performance for the Carmel Delights and I'm a little nervous about it because I'm about to light my shoes on fire and I haven't done that before. So it's in a safe environment and I can do that as practice. They're not paying me that much and there's like a little bit of money, so that's great. Experience and money. When you get paid to do something you're not super confident with yet, that's called imposter syndrome. And you will be like, I don't deserve this. What is happening? How am I gonna make this work? They're gonna know. I actually really like to live in imposter syndrome central, it turns out, but I can't stay in it too long before I start to feel like really weird about it and I need to go back over here and practice. So just know that like when you're sitting in these two worlds, it can really feel like that's where for me imposter syndrome wells up a lot. It's really valuable, but it is also like kind of disconcerting. Community and money. If you get to play around people that you love, people that you care about and make money doing it, you're gonna be so happy and comfortable and eventually bored. For me. Like I really don't like stagnating, even if it's easy, I like to be pushing myself. So that's where usually I go in this order. So I go around and around and around these three little spots. And then occasionally get a gig where I get to land right dead center in the middle, and that's just like hallelujah. It's not often, but it happens, where you get paid really well, do something you love with people you care about, that is your specialty. And I get to do that with the Big Surf and Wine Foundation. We're producing a Dolly show. For that show, it's like here and here, back and forth for me as I'm producing this event. But that's usually how you can tell. So you might drop your price. If you've got an opportunity, you might come out of money into this space or this space, but it's up to you to decide. So drop your price when it makes sense to you, but just know that like you want to be moving around that whole sphere. Booking etiquette, we're just gonna go this really fast, just because I see it a lot and it's how I think, and I've seen it and more than just performance. If you say yes to something, your word is the only thing that you have that's consistent. It's all you got. So if people don't trust you to do what you say you're gonna do, that's a problem. And I've seen people who drop gigs for other gigs because the money's better, and it drives me crazy. Like, then you didn't price yourself right to begin with, because it should have been pretty clear. Opportunities happen. I just turned down opportunity to do a 2-month-long show because one date didn't work. And they were like, could you move that date? And I was like, could. Not gonna. Because they're contracted. They've been contracted. They've been a great client for 3 years. I am not asking them to move a date I signed a contract for this opportunity. It's just not gonna happen. So that stings sometimes when it bites that way, but I do also go like, it's the right call for me to not, if something's in contract, it is ironclad to me. If you've contracted, I mean, stuff happens, goodness knows. And you can always ask. But I feel like that's my ethics as a performer, and it's gotten me a lot farther. And I might have lost me some stuff, but I really think what it's gained me is not worrying if something's gonna happen or bite me in the butt after years and years of doing this. Same thing as I have difficulty sometimes with keeping promises to my friends and family until I said friends and family time, if it's in this book, it's as ironclad as a contract. That has helped a lot, and that's when I've turned down money and cool things to spend time with friends and family because they booked that time, and that's just as ironclad. So it's made it a lot easier to deal with the ups and downs. So like, say somebody wants a date and somebody else has that date but it's not in contract yet. Please, please, please don't just hope it's gonna work out. It doesn't. I always say, like, it's first right of refusal. That's a policy where if you have something on the books and I don't know that you want it contracted yet, somebody else asks me for that date, I go back to you first and I say, hey, there's somebody else behind the scenes who like wants this date. You have, usually it's a week tops. I prefer 48 to 72 hours to tell me if you want to go to contract. And that means contract. Not just, yeah, we want you to keep holding it. Nope, you better give me it in writing that I'm doing this event. Or if that contract doesn't come through, you see the event to the next person. And I've had the same date shuffle over 5 times. And then maybe not book at all. But it's better than having it up in the air, because the people who you go back to and you say, hey, you're gonna lose this date unless I get this contract. They go, oh wait, but I'm not gonna lose this date just because you decided to give it away. Performance etiquette, show up on time. That's really the only one I care about. That's it, really. That's what you can. That's the only thing in this world again we have control over, is like how we approach ourselves. These other things can be helpful, but yeah, the show up on time one is key. Contracts, we'll go over that again. The biggest one here is basic event details. Force majeure. Force majeure means shit happens, acts of God happen. This is the circumstances in which we cancel the event. When COVID happened, a lot of us had force majeure in our contracts. Now, force majeure usually excludes COVID for that reason, because nobody wants to pay you a kill fee to do that. So that's been a change in contracts. Contracts usually also come with a deposit. My deposits are often non-refundable. They're not that much. Sometimes they're up to 50% of the show, but most of the time I sit around 20 because I'm not asking people to like spend a huge amount of money just to make sure this happens. So, but it's nice when something cancels, and then they usually can reschedule that event for that same fee without further deposit. So again, that's just a way to like get some money in, especially if you're traveling, because then you need that money to buy your plane ticket. I'm not buying a plane ticket until I have a contract and a deposit. So that's also things that I do to just keep all of us safe. But because of that, that's why my contracts are ironclad, because if you did that, then I'm not messing with your date or your event for pretty much anything. Last thing I'll say before we take questions, outsourcing any of this. I work mostly by myself. I do outsource a couple of things, mostly in media. So I'm not very good at taking my own photos or videos, so I like to hire people to help me do that, or collaborate with people to help me do that. So this one though, is I see a lot of people, especially when they're newer into performance medium, feeling overwhelmed with the stuff that they have to do and say, I need help to do it. That can be true, but you only need a manager or agents or assistants if you have so much work coming at you that you can't handle it. you need strategic help to get that work if you don't have it already. So I think that's the difference between like an agency to help put you out there versus an agent that's helping you manage the opportunities that you have. I'm not even at this point. I'm almost at this point, but like I don't really need a manager at this point. I can still handle it by myself. I could use some help with social media. I could use some help with things that I just find that I don't have the time to do, but you don't need operational help until you're overwhelmed with operational stuff. You might need help with consulting. You might need help honing in on your brand. You might need help getting your social media plan in place. Those are things that absolutely can help get you to the point that this might be necessary. But the amount of time I've seen bands go, oh, we need a manager. I'm like, you play one show a month. You don't need a manager. You need a marketing person to help you sell yourself so that when you try to book a show, you get that show. So those are different things. And then your community is your best source of information. Like, we're here, ask us things. Most of us are really happy to share. You know, to a certain extent, we're busy, but like, fuck us, it's fine. That's why I'm always happy to help with marketing stuff. I really enjoy marketing other people because then I'm way better at giving advice than following my own advice. But yeah, I love branding, I love marketing, I love positioning for where I am in the community or where somebody sits in their professional career. And so I'm always happy to do that. And then I'm gonna open up to questions. If you scan this, you'll get on my Instagram and you can follow me there. I mostly just post on Instagram, cross-post to Facebook. So if you're seeing me on Facebook, it's probably the same content. And then I am slightly faster on DMs on Instagram, but then you can also email me here, Razzvio, with any questions. That was a lot of talking at you guys. Here's a little about actually playing music. So are there questions?
I think we can take like a couple of questions and then we're gonna have to, it's time-wise.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Hi.
Good to see you. And I know you said people are more receptive like to events right now. That's really opened up since COVID.
Yeah.
Have you found since COVID just that people are different altogether as far as the significance of the arts, and it's not just a luxury, it's a necessity?
No. I do wish it was more of a necessity and that understanding was there. It is a luxury. It's a luxury good, especially in this medium, especially in California, especially in the Bay Area. I would not consider it. I actually see a deeper privatization of the arts in this community than I do see open access, which is concerning. There's some people in this room are very much counteracting that, which I really appreciate. And but know that that is a trend where it is important, but it's important to the people who can afford it. And so what we're seeing is a shift over into arts being for private collectors in every sense of the word. When it comes to performance, when it comes to having artistic experiences, they are moving into a privatization, and I do want to fight that as much as possible from like a community standpoint.
I have a question, and I've gone to your website, and I notice throughout your performances and shows and whatever, you do looping.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for you, is it easier to do live looping, or do you lay the track down at home and bring it to every gig so you can play over top of it with your violin? So I guess live tracks or live looping, I guess.
I've done it both ways. I do have tracks in my phone that were loops that I've done for video recordings, and I'd like to have them on hand because I've gotten them as requests. And so having it in the back pocket where I don't need an extra setup or an extra piece of technology in order to like perform it the way somebody heard it online. But I do prefer, if I'm gonna loop, it's gonna be 100% live and I don't lay anything down, because that's one of my favorite parts is. And I also usually take requests when I'm looping, so people can ask me to play any song, and if I can sing it in my head and like know it well enough melodically, I can look up a lead sheet and do it on the fly, and that's resulted in some of like my favorite impromptu performances and collaborations with guests is when they get to ask me something and I just kind of have to like figure it out in the moment.
Right.
So,
I have one more little question.
Yeah.
So say I'm a corporate entity.
Mhm.
The way that I reach you is arrive at your website and then go from there. If I've never heard of you before, because I notice you have albums out there, you have samples of songs, you have a gallery of pictures.
Mhm.
So is that where they land? Is that the important part?
It's important for it to exist so that there is a presence there. I structure my pages like what's called an EPK or an electronic press kit, so you get a smattering of all the things that I can do. And that's what the website is really there for. It's a representation of who I am kind of right now.
Right.
A little less about the services. We dial into that in some ways. I actually have a separate website entirely that I send people to if they want DJing, so electricviolindj.com. So I have actually multiple websites with different branding to help consolidate, because somebody over here who wants a DJ doesn't always want to know everything I've done on the music side, so I have a different website to send them to for that. And then they can reach out to me directly from the website. It does happen. It's not as common as reaching out through an agency, because those companies don't want an unsure thing. They want to have a vetted product that they know is going to be really consistent. So agencies are much better at being the source of the vetting for those clients, and that's where, but agencies are often looking for different things than you might think. So it's everything from like tarot readers to people that'll paint their face in a funny way, and like you don't always know what they want. So somebody who's playing like a simpler medium, sometimes it's nice not to have the amplification or not to need it, or be a roving performer that's really invested in the small group around you. So just because it seems like a simple product does not mean that people don't want it. In fact, if it's simple, it's usually easy to just say yes and move on. So agencies want a lot more diversity of their acts than you might imagine.
I have one little tiny question. What is the ratio of you selling albums online or selling them in person or in a hard disk?
When I was selling more hard copies, I haven't actually gotten a printing of a hard copy in a really long time. When I was selling them, the medium to me is much higher selling it in person, because I get $10 versus like $1 if I sell it online. So obviously it was always when I was focusing on selling albums as any kind of income, it was always better to do it in person directly to the consumer myself. But it wasn't enough to move the needle in any way that made it make sense outside of just advertising and having people have the product. Now it's a nice thing to do, but it's not now. It's like 0% of my income. So I'm not focused on it right at this point, but I did see that it'd be better selling in person.
Thank you very much.
Brian,
Do you itemize your contract? Like, let's say you're going to Seattle,
Mhm.
you say, okay, this is how much it is for gear rental, or, do you itemize it so that makes them feel comfortable, or you just say it's my rate?
Often I itemize, because especially there's also I also put a clause in contracts for travel contracts that have an expiration date, because I will give the price for the travel to a point. After that expiration date, that needs to be renegotiated because the cost of the flight might have gone up. So I always say it can go down, but I'm like, this is the price for travel, for gear, for the service, because then they can see the why of it, and then that lets it, the price for my services might not have changed, but the price for travel did. So if you don't sign the contract within this time frame, we gotta go back to square one and redo it. So that means that I don't get screwed on the flight if they take their sweet time making the contract happen. So yeah, I do itemize because I need to change things sometimes in those categories. And if they can see that change, then we've got a better communication strategy than just, hey, this is the price, and oh, it changed. And they go, why? Hey, this is the price, but the travel changed. Hey, this is the price, but we weren't able to find the gear you wanted, so here, we have to do this instead. So that, it just gives more flexibility. So yeah, I often itemize.
I see that she's about ready to get up, so
Yeah.
I'm just curious, can we get your charts somehow? Or are you gonna post them, or?
Oh,
I
like
take photographs.
The
so,
slides?
Oh, yeah, I can post them or send them to Karen.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
We'll email it out to everyone who's on the list.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If you signed up, you'll receive the PowerPoint.
So after you kind of honed your process as a musician, did you package your actual music as like, oh, I'm gonna do X amount of time and you already know the set list? Or were you changing songs but you would play for a certain amount of time? How would you kind of go about the actual artistic part that you were packaging?
so I do have a list of music that I send to people that are covers, and then I say, here, you can pick kind of what you want. Now that list is over 500 songs long, so usually I'll say, do you have any special requests? Do you have any demographics that you want me to hit? Do you have any types of music that you want me to play? And then I can start the set list based off of that information, and then I can send it to them for approval, and sometimes I will request that. 99% of the time, they don't actually care. So as long as they feel like I've heard what we're here to do, they'll usually trust me on the set list itself. Oftentimes I'll have set lists that are built that are about 4 hours long for each kind of medium, and then I just hit shuffle if it's on my backing track side of things. If I'm looping, I definitely have specific set lists that I have an app for that keeps track of all of my lead sheets as well as all of the tempos for the loops so that I don't have to spend extra time programming that in. So I have I make set lists for almost every single event, DJ events as well. So I have huge, massive catalogs, but oftentimes after a certain point, I can recycle those set lists because the medium is pretty similar. So yeah, I do spend a lot of time pre-show building the set list or working with the client on the set list. Like that Microsoft one, that was a really specific classical music set list that had me just tearing my hair out. But the rest of it, and that was 1 hour of a 4-hour show, and the rest of it was my standard stuff. So
Yeah.
for
So you have kind of a standard, like if you had to play a gig tomorrow, you could just be like, I have an hour of material that I'm ready to do.
absolutely, yeah. Any second of any day, I can pick up my violin and basically play a show for people, which means that I don't have to prep it.
Yeah.
It's there, it's in my head. Some songs are easier than others, but it also means, especially as a DJ, it's really been a nice collaborative thing because most of my work is by ear. I don't read sheet music for a lot of it. So if I can sing it in my head, I've got enough practice where I can play it with my hands. As a DJ, you're not playing as much, but you're hearing so much music that I know kind of the trends before I even get to the gig because I've been doing that research as a DJ. So I'm playing a cover band gig tomorrow, actually for a wedding. It's my first time playing with this band, and I know all of their music. Not because I have lead sheets for it, but because I've heard these songs a million times, and I can basically play them by ear. So knowing what the songs are gonna be, even if it's not the original version, has been really helpful. And it's just steeping yourself in that information. Practicing for me, I have long drives, so I'm usually listening to tracks and practicing and singing along to tracks while I'm driving, and that is basically almost at this point as good as practicing it with the instrument in my hands.
All right, well, thank you so much.
And we gotta go, but like I'm happy to stand outside and
Yeah.
check this out.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody for coming to our BusinessWorks session. And you see, it's like a wealth of information. An hour just was not even enough.
I was
Not enough time.
like, skip.
I know. Thank you all so much, and make sure to follow us on our Arts for NC social media. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.